Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the 2024 Charles Schwab Challenge taking place at Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, we're back in Texas on the PGA Tour this week, and I got to say this is one of the better PGA Tour venues in my opinion. Colonial has been one of the longest running host courses on the PGA Tour, but this year is going to be a little bit different. And there's not a whole lot of people that are creating golf content this week that are talking about this. So you're going to want to listen up. You're going to want to see how this plays is going to be a little bit different this year compared to years past. So on this episode, we are going to break down the course itself and these changes that have happened at Colonial. And then we're going to take a look at the stats and at the betting board and at the DFS board. And we're going to see when we can identify some of our favorite plays in DFS betting and one and done this week. So no matter what game you're playing, we've got you covered here on this episode for the 2024 Charles Schwab Challenge. Now, while you are here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you can be with us for the rest of the PGA Tour season, as well as all of our NFL, college football, college basketball, best ball content that is going to be coming your way here at Mike's Money Picks. You're going to want to be subscribed to all of that when all that gets back in season. We're probably going to have some NFL best ball content coming up shortly, as well as some college football content. So make sure you're subscribed so you can be there for that. And also go and check out our NFL best ball episode that we already recorded where we talk about the best ball strategies for the 2024 season. Now, before we get going with the preview, I do want to get off some PGA Championship hot takes. You know, we just had a major in the world of golf, and anytime there's a major, there's hot takes to be had, right? So if you do not want to hear these hot takes, then fast forward about 4 minutes, and I'll probably be onto the course preview. But, major happens. I feel like we got to talk about it. We got to have a little bit of, closure on golf's majors, right? So first off, props to Xander Schauffele. Like, he finally got his first major win, and believe it or not, I literally texted my dad on Thursday morning, and looking at the leaderboard, I said I have zero faith in Xander to lead this tournament and continue to win it. Like, I just have no faith in him to finish the job off, and I was wrong because Xander has had this reputation as the guy who plays great in majors, who plays great in regular PGA Tour events, but just can't close it out and can't win. And he finally got that win here at Valhalla, and I gotta say, to me, this is probably the biggest getting the monkey off of his back major win of my golf watching lifetime. I'm not old enough to remember Phil's first major win, like watching that, but I can imagine that's kind of what it felt like. Like, it just felt like Xander has had this coming for a long time. Xander had had a lot of haters, a lot of doubters, and he was finally able to get the monkey off of his back and win his first major. So props to Xander Schauffele, especially doing it in epic fashion. Like, that was a really, really entertaining final round of golf. And which brings me to my second hot take. I enjoyed Valhalla. I like that golf course. I think that anybody who is criticizing it, it's fair. Like, it certainly played easier than I was expecting to. But for what we got, the tournament that we got, I thought we got a very entertaining and very fun PGA Championship, right? Like, Valhalla, for all of its faults, it has memorable golf holes, 7 with the dual fairways, 13 with the island green, 15 with the water approaching, and then 18 the par 5. Like, those are memorable golf holes. I can't tell you a single golf hole from TPC Harding Park or Belle Reve or Baltusrol, but, Valhalla is going to have those holes that we're going to remember for a while, right? And more importantly is Valhalla, the way it was set up, it allowed great players to make great shots. Like, if you were just watching the coverage, it was just like wow after wow after wow, like just guys making these incredible shots. And to me, that's part of the fun of watching golf, is seeing the best in the world be the best in the world. They don't have to be shooting bogeys and double bogeys for that to be the case. They can go into attack mode, and they can go pin hunting, and they can make great shots, and that can be fun to watch. And more importantly out of all of it is it ended with a great leaderboard and a great finish, and not all major championships give us that. So props to Valhalla for giving us all of that. Now, if you want to, nitpick the winning score, look, I'm not somebody who cares about the score at the par when watching a golf tournament. I just want to see great golf, and I want to see great players play great golf. So I do not care that the winning score was minus 21. But I think the simple fact of the matter is that the soft conditions contributed greatly to that. The fact that there had been a lot of weather in Louisville, the fact that it was playing super soft, that course didn't really have that much defenses without it being able to be very firm and very fast. And if you remember, 2020, the November Masters that was won by Dustin Johnson, that was a very soft and damp Augusta National, and it played to minus 20 under par for DJ that week. So, like, any course when it gets soft and damp is going to play easy. And Valhalla, I don't think it surrendered as many bogeys as people were hoping for, but that's just because the greens aren't very difficult. Jack Nicklaus courses generally don't have very difficult greens, so I think that's a very legitimate gripe. But in terms of the overall tournament experience, I like Valhalla. They got some raucous crowds out there in Louisville. Great tournament to watch on TV. And I think that Bryson is going to be a guy to watch out for in the next 3 or 4 years in major championships, because that guy, I think he might have one of the highest ceilings in golf when he has everything cooking. Another hot take. Jon Rahm is no longer a top 5 golfer in the world. I mean, actually, I might even go one step further and say he might not even be a top 10 golfer in the world right now. 2 straight majors, he's been a colossal disappointment, and the move to live just has not worked well for him. He just seems grumpy and irritable. He keeps, stumbling in press conferences and just saying things that make him look not very smart. And I just don't think he really was prepared to manage all that came with his move to live. And he is not going to be a guy who's going to be on my radar at the next 2 majors unless he can show me something in between or show me something at the US Open, and maybe I can get on him at the British Open. I have no faith in that guy playing well at a major right now, and I think he's going to continue to be the high leverage play at majors. Like, nobody played him in DFS at Valhalla, but turns out it was for good reason, because he was not prepared and did not make the cut. Lastly, last hot take. I think Victor and Sahith are next in line for majors. Like, I think those 2 guys are going to be the next 2 that are, first-time major champions. I think that Victor just has a game that sets up very well for major championships. I think he is all the way back. And Sahith, I just think that the dude has it. And I think that a lot was asked of him on Sunday to be in the second last group in a major, first time really in contention in a major. And he kind of stumbled on Sunday, but you kind of have to have that experience as a young guy so that way you can finally break through later. If you remember, Jordan Spieth was in the final pairing back in 2014 at Augusta with Bubba Watson, and Spieth did not play well, and Watson won that in a runaway. But it gave him that experience that way the next time he was in that spot, he was able to come through and win his first Masters. Now, from a game perspective, from DFS and betting perspective, for me, it was mostly a negative week in DFS, but it was a positive week in betting. From a DFS perspective, it was really tough to win money without Xander, because pretty much of the big 5 that we talked about last week, 4 of them did pretty good. Like Scotty, Rory, Xander, and Brooks were pretty good. They made the cut. They scored a lot of fantasy points, Xander obviously being the winner. And the 5th one was Jon Rahm, who missed the cut at very little ownership. Ludwig Åberg missed the cut at very little ownership. So, like, even though if you picked a guy at the top of the board like I did, I had a lot of Rory and a lot of Brooks, you just weren't able to gain ground on the people that had Xander, and you weren't able to gain a whole lot of ground on the people that had Scotty either. And there weren't very many people that had Rahm and Åberg. So it was just really tough to win if you did not have Xander. And so I did have a few lineups with Xander, and I had a lot of the right guys. I had a lot of Justin Rose. I had a ton of Shane Lowry. He was a core play for me. And I had a lot of Austin Eckroat as well, but I just couldn't really find the right combination. I think I had too big of a player pool. I tried to get too many guys in there, and it just ended with a lot of lineups where I had like 5 of 6s make the cut, or 5 of 6s that are like top 20 with another guy who's not. And so I think that next major, I need to remember this next major, smaller player pool, have more convictions on your guys, and hopefully that'll help you hit the right lineup more likely. And in hindsight, last week we did all the breakdown on Valhalla. It seems like all the Jack Nicklaus course guys did very well. Bryson DeChambeau, Victor Hovland, Colin Morikawa all won at Memorial. Shane Lowry, Austin Eckroat, won at PGA National. Billy Horschel won at Memorial. Justin Rose won at Memorial. So I guess, if we're ever at Valhalla again, just look at the guys who play Jack Nicklaus course as well. And I think that might be a clue next week when we start talking about the Memorial. I think you can look at a lot of guys at Valhalla to see who might end up playing well at the Memorial. All right, so anyway, enough for the PGA Championship. Let's go ahead and dive into the breakdown. Let's go ahead and talk about the Charles Schwab Challenge and Colonial Country Club. All right, so the big news about Colonial Country Club this season is that they underwent a renovation. And this, well, I guess you'd call it a renovation. I think the technical word is a restoration. So it is going to look differently this year than it has in previous years. And it is going to play, I think, mostly the same, but there is going to be some difference. It's certainly going to look different on your TV. Now, Colonial Country Club is situated in Fort Worth, Texas. It is one of the longest running host sites on the PGA Tour. It was designed in the early 1900s by Perry Maxwell. It is a very classic classical parkland design, tree-lined fairways, water hazards, just very pristine and everything, just nice. It's basically like just a nice Dallas country club in my opinion. Now, it is a par 70. It is about 7,200 yards, but it gets to that 7,200 yards in a different way than most courses do. All of the par threes at Colonial are above 190 yards, and there is only two par fives, one of which is going to be reachable for the entire field, and one of which is not going to be reachable for pretty much anyone in the field. Pretty much everybody's going to be laying up and hitting a wedge shot on one of the par fives. So if you account for the long par threes and one of the long par fives, that means there's not a whole lot of distance on the par fours, and that's pretty much the case. You end up with a lot of very short to average length par fours, a lot of par fours that are either 350 to 400 yards or the low 400 yards. So you're going to end up with a lot of short and middle iron approach shots here this week at Colonial. It's not going to be a long iron contest like the CJ Cup or Valhalla. It's not going to be a wedge fest either. It's going to be a lot of mid to short irons. And really, this is a week where the iron play is going to be supreme. Fairways at this course are on average about 27 yards wide. That is pretty darn narrow. And like I said earlier, they are tree lined. So there is not big landing zones, not big landing corridors for drivers. So what you're going to see a lot of this week is guys that are laying back a little bit off the tee, hitting less than driver, or a lot of dog legs where guys are just going to play to a certain spot as opposed to just bombing it off the tee. Now, in the last few years, Sam Burns as well as Jason Kokrak have used kind of a more driver-heavy approach and just kind of really been smart about their angles and smart about where they place the ball. I think you can have a driver-heavy strategy here, but it's certainly been the track record in the past at Colonial to be a little bit more of a layback off the tee kind of setup. And also, I do think that with this restoration, there have been a little bit of trees removed, not a whole lot, but just some that were kind of overgrown or more in play than they were originally intended. So I do think that it might be a little more accessible to play driver off the tee, but not a whole lot. This is a course where, for the most part, guys are going to be playing to a spot, and then it's going to be the approach play and the putting from there where guys are going to be able to separate themselves. Now, the greens themselves are very small, about 5,000 square feet. It's about the same size we saw at Valhalla, and they are also bent grass like what we saw at Valhalla. If a guy had a good putting week at Valhalla, it very much stands to reason that they can have a good putting week here at Colonial Country Club. Now, with that Gil Hanse restoration, the way you're going to see it look differently on TV is there were restorations of a lot of natural areas. If you remember LACC back last summer, Gil Hanse did a restoration of that as well. And so there is a barranca on this course now like there was at LACC. There's just a lot more natural terrain, and it looks a little less manicured, a little more rugged, and it just kind of looks more, I don't know, it looks more, what's the right word I'm looking for? Not as well kept. It doesn't look like this, pristine country club like what it had been for the previous 50 years. Now, one thing you also need to know about this week is this is not going to be a birdie fest. This is not going to be a course that plays super easy. I also don't think it's going to be a course that plays super duper hard because, it's kind of hard to make 7,200 yards super long. But the reason why it will not play easy is it's going to be very firm and fast. This is Dallas. This is Texas. And Texas tends to get firm and fast. And it tends to get pretty windy here. And if the wind gets going, the conditions can get really tough. And you can see the winning score around 8 or 9 under, which is what it's been the last 2 years. If you do end up with rain this week and you end up with softer, more docile conditions, then you can see the winning score get a little bit lower. But when this course gets firm and fast and the wind gets going, it is one of the tougher short courses that you will see. So knowing all that about Colonial Country Club this week, if we take a look at who plays well at this course, it kind of tracks with what we were talking about, right? Guys who play well here tend to be shorter hitters off the tee who are elite iron players and can be elite putters. Normally, you don't see the winners or really the guys who are near the top of the leaderboard here gain a lot of strokes around the green or gain a lot of strokes off the tee. You're going to see it all with approach and putting. Harry Hall and Paul Haley last year kind of came out of nowhere and did that exact same formula and finished in the top 5 as first-time players at Colonial Country Club. So other than those two guys, anybody who with any kind of meaningful sample size at Colonial Country Club, Jordan Spieth is the leader in terms of strokes gained. He averages 2.4 strokes gained per round. His only missed cut here was last year, and that is a full half a stroke better than any other player at this course who's played more than 4 rounds. Colin Morikawa's played here 4 times and never missed the cut, never finished outside the top 40. Scotty Scheffler has missed a cut here, but his last 2 finishes have been runner-up in T3. And then Tony Finau has played it the last 5 years, finished 23rd or better 4 times, including a runner-up and a T4, but did miss the cut here last year. So, with that list, you just see a lot of guys that are really like solid iron players and can get hot with the putter, right? You look at last year's winner, Emiliano Grillo, that's his formula. Justin Rose, previous winner here. Daniel Berger, previous winner here. You're not seeing the bombers that play well, particularly here at Colonial Country Club. So my key stats for this week are going to be, the only stat off the tee that I'm going to look for is good drive percentage. I also think if you have the ability to filter this week, this would be a good week to look at short courses, because in my opinion, course history and comp course history are going to be very important this week. But the most important thing is going to be recent approach play. Guys who are good on approach are going to be the guys that I want this week, bar none. And then in terms of putting, make sure you're looking at bent grass putting, because these are bent grass greens. And like I said, I think last week at Valhalla is a pretty good indicator of how somebody might putt this week. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's dive down the rabbit hole. All right, so if you've been with us for a while for this PGA Tour season, you know that when I say the rabbit hole, I'm not talking about an actual rabbit hole. I'm talking about the rabbit hole, which is a tool from BetSperts Golf that is, in my opinion, the best statistical database that exists for golf right now. Like, just all the custom conditions and filters that they have, you can really get in the weeds and narrow down specific types of skill sets and find specific type of golfers and find some data and some trends that you may have not known were there if you didn't have option all or to find all those filters. So I really like this tool. It's helped me out a lot this year. So we're going to go through some stats from the rabbit hole and see if we can identify who we like in this field and build a custom model and see where we're at. So the first thing we're going to look at is short courses, because this is a short course and it plays like a short course. So guys who generally play short courses well should fare pretty well here. In the top 10 in terms of strokes gained total in the last year and a half on short courses are Scotty Scheffler, no surprise. He's going to come in for number 1 for a lot of stuff, just giving you a heads up. Number 2 is Eric Cole, followed by Denny McCarthy. Chris Kirk, Minwoo Lee is your top 5, with Colin Morikawa, Brian Harmon, Sungjae Im, Mark Hubbard, and JT Poston rounding out the top 10. If we go just off the tee on short courses, number 1 is still Scotty Scheffler, followed by Kevin Yu, Austin Eckroat, Sungjae Im, and Minwoo Lee as your top 5, and Aaron Rai sitting right on the outside looking in. Strokes gained approach on short courses. This starts to be more of the familiar suspects I would have thought would have popped up high. Number 1 is Scotty Scheffler, 2 Tom Hoge, followed by Grayson Sigg, Tony Finau, Troy Merritt, Chris Kirk, Alex Smalley, Mark Hubbard, Ches Reavie, Siwoo Kim as your top 10, with Sepp Straka, Akshay Bhatia, Eric Cole, Lucas Glover all sitting right there on the outside. Those are a lot of names that when I think of short courses, I think of guys that play well there. So that one did not end up being that much of a surprise for me. Now, one stat that also I'm going to look at is who gained strokes off the tee at courses where it's difficult to gain strokes off the tee at, right? With everybody laying up to a similar spot, it's really difficult to gain strokes off the tee. So who is able to actually find those spots on a consistent basis and be positive off the tee? Well, the top 5 in that category are Scotty Scheffler, Kevin Yu, Alejandro Tosti, Keith Mitchell, and Siwoo Kim, with Austin Eckroat and Minwoo Lee just sitting there on the outside looking in. Next up, we've talked about this stat before. I love it. It's distance from edge of fairway, which means do you miss big when you miss the fairway? And I'm going to look at that just for short courses, because to me that impacts the clubs that guys are swinging off the tee quite a lot. And number 1 and number 2 in this stat are Daniel Berger and Rafael Campos, but they have very small sample sizes. Ryan Moore, Mac Meisner, Siwoo Kim, Tyler Duncan, Carson Young, Ben Coles, Brian Harmon, and Scotty Scheffler round out the top 10. See, pretty much any stat you can find, Scotty Scheffler is going to be in the top 10, except for putting. Another stat that I want to look at is just recent approach play. So last 16 rounds, who are the best approach players in the field? I think this is the number 1 determining stat this week, and I weighted it heavily in my model. The top 10 is Scotty Scheffler, Keith Mitchell, Grayson Sigg, Lucas Glover, Chan Kim, Nate Lashley, Keegan Bradley, Ryan Moore, Justin Lauer, and Ricky Fowler. Next up, we're going to take a look at small greens because whether you realize it or not, hitting approach shots into small greens is drastically different from hitting approach shots into big greens. And so, who are the best in the field at approach shots into small greens? Well, Scotty Scheffler is number one, Mark Hubbard, Tony Finau, Colin Morikawa, and Grayson Sigg as your top five, with Christian Bezadenhout, Ches Reavie, Siwoo Kim, Carson Young, and Alex Smalley rounding out the top 10 there. Next up, we have got bent grass putting, who are the best bent grass putters in the field over the last year and a half. So pretty much the start of the 2023 season to right now. Denny McCarthy is number one, followed by Victor Perez, Ari Hall, Billy Horschel, JT Poston, Justin Rose, Thomas Dietrich, Max Homa, Nick Hardy, and Brandt Snedeker. A lot of interesting names there. Not super surprised to see Harry Hall pop up. He's a Vegas guy, as is Justin Suh, as is Doug Gim, that just play on bent grass all the time. And so if you're playing on that surface all the time at your home courses, you're definitely going to get pretty accustomed to it. Next up, we have got what was this stat going to be? Now I remember. This one is strokes gained total in the state of Texas for the last 5 years, because I think this plays as a traditionally Texas golf course. So who are the best in the state of Texas? Well, should come as no surprise. The Longhorn himself, Jordan Spieth, number one, followed by Tony Finau, and then another Longhorn, Scotty Scheffler, number three, followed by Matt Kuchar, Gary Woodland, Akshay Bhatia, Aaron Ryan, Daniel Berger, Brendan Todd, and Christian Bezadenhout rounding out the top 10, with Rose, Glover, McCarthy, English, McNeely rounding out to top 15. Like, there's a lot of names on that board that I'm going to be playing in DFS this week. I can tell you that right now. Next up, who plays well in windy conditions? And no surprise, Scotty Scheffler, number one. I do think the wind is going to pick up quite a bit this week in Dallas. So I definitely think that this is something to look into. Siwoo Kim, number two. Akshay Bhatia, number three. He is a guy who I feel like every time I watch when he's playing in the wind, he plays well. Whether it's at San Antonio and Houston, at the island courses, like I think he's a really good fit this week. Maverick McNeely, number four. Denny McCarthy, number five. Horschel, Bezadenhout, Harmon, Davis Thompson, and Doug Gim rounding out the top 10. Almost near the end, y'all. We're going to take a look at just par 70s, because how you play a par 70 is going to be much different from how you have to think about scoring as opposed to playing a par 72. So the top five in the field on par 70s are Scotty Scheffler, Minwoo Lee, Colin Morikawa, Eric Cole, and Austin Eckroat, with Andrew Putnam, Max Homa, Brian Harmon, Chris Kirk, and Adam Scott rounding out the top 10. Now, the last stat that I looked at is the comp courses, which I realized that I neglected to mention previously. So the comp courses that I'm going to use there are the shorter positional golf courses on the PGA Tour: Sawgrass, Sedgefield, Harbortown, Pebble Beach. And then also, for whatever reason, there is a ton of crossover with the leaderboards and winners at Valspar, the Copperhead course at Innisbrook Resort, as there is for Colonial. Sam Burns has won both events. Jason Kokrak has won both events. Jordan Spieth has won both events. Adam Schenk was runner-up last year at both events. So for whatever reason, there's a lot of crossover, so I am factoring that one in. And I'm also putting in last year's U.S. Open at LACC. The reason why is that was also a Gil Hanse restoration. So if there's any thing that's going to change about the course because of a Gil Hanse restoration, you might figure that there's a little bit of traces of that in LACC. Other than that, it is not a very similar course, but I did think that it was worth throwing in there, considering that we're looking at the last 5 years at 7 different courses, and that's just 4 rounds in there. I definitely think it's worth a little sprinkle. So when it comes to comp courses, the top of the leaderboard is Scotty Scheffler, Daniel Berger, Jordan Spieth, Sungjae Im, and Brian Harmon is your top 5, followed by Bezadenhout, Morikawa, Horschel, Tom Kim, and Webb Simpson rounding out the top 10. So you throw all of that into a model. What do you get? Surprise, Scotty Scheffler's number one. I mean, that probably surprised absolutely no one, right? Scotty Scheffler, I think no matter how you construct a model this week, unless you put it 100% on putting and driving accuracy, he's going to show up number one. He's the best off the tee player in the field. He's the best approach player in the field. He's the best around the green player in the field. He's got the best recent form. He's probably got the most wins in the last 2 years of anybody who's in the field. It's pretty impossible to not have him number one. Now, after that is where it gets interesting. Siwoo Kim is number 2. I did not see that one coming. He's not a guy I'm going to be playing in DFS this week unless I continue to look at this and the data really talks me into it. I am not hyped for Siwoo at this venue at all. He has not played it very well in the past. He did not play last week very well at the PGA Championship. I'm a little concerned, and I don't think he's a great bent grass putter. So I'm probably out on Siwoo this week, even though he came in second in my model. He's a guy who traditionally plays shorter positional golf courses very well, and I think that's why he came in second in the model. Third is Chris Kirk, a guy I will definitely be playing this week, former winner at this event. Colin Morikawa, fourth, former runner-up at this event. Denny McCarthy, fifth, followed by Keegan Bradley, Lucas Glover, Austin Eckroat, Brian Harmon, and Sepp Straka rounding out the top 10. Aaron Rye, 11, Max Homa and Tony Finau, 12 and 13. Those are going to be guys that I play a ton in DFS this week. I'm just going to say straight up. Like every single one of those guys, except for maybe Lucas Glover, I'm going to have heavy ownership on in DFS. Maybe not Denny McCarthy either. I think that Denny might end up being chalk, and that has me a little bit concerned. After that, notables that I do like: Mark Hubbard at 15, Akshay Bhatia at 18, Andrew Putnam at 19, Billy Horschel at 22, Tom Kim at 23, Jordan Spieth all the way down at 25, but that's a little bit of the recent stuff and a little bit of the deep distance from edge of fairway stuff bumps him down a little bit. I really do like Justin Rose and Doug Gim, and they came in at 29 and 31. All right, so that does it for the rabbit hole. That is just my first run of the model. I'm going to continue to tinker with that all week long. So if you do want to see the final top 10 of my model, subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. Every week for every PGA Tour tournament, every live tournament, every alternate event, I post the top 10 for my model as well as my DFS core for both DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as a full write-up. You can get that on the Patreon. And coming on over the summer on the Patreon is going to be NFL best ball rankings, NFL season-long rankings, and college football best ball rankings as well. So that'll all be going up on there in addition to the golf content. And then once the season starts, you will get the DFS scores for college football, college basketball, and NFL. Also, if you're looking for a community to talk DFS with, join the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Got a lot of smart people who talk DFS for a lot of different sports, and golf is one of them. So hop on in there if you're looking for people to talk DFS with. All right, so that does it for the rabbit hole. Let's go ahead and take a look at the board and see what we got this week. All right, so looking at the board this week, this is another week in DFS where Scotty Scheffler is the whale on the board. Right, he is at $13,300 on DraftKings. He's at $13,800, on FanDuel. So he is by far the highest priced golfer, and I gotta say, I think this is a week where I am going to be overweight to the field on Scotty Scheffler. Simply put, this is a week where everything should line up perfectly for Scheffler. This is a course that he has played well at. He's finished second and third here in the last 2 years, and he is at the absolute peak of his powers, and I think it is highly likely that he turns in at least another top 5 finish, if not a win, here at this course. And also with this week, I gotta say, I also have some serious question marks about like the entire rest of the top of the board. And I think that this is a week where if you go to Scheffler, you have an average remaining of 7,300 on DraftKings. And from there, if you're willing to get a little bit crafty with someone in the 6K range or the 5K range, like let's just say, for instance, I click on, I don't know, Dylan Wu, I'm back up to 7,650, and I really, really love the 8K range this week. So that will allow me to get multiple guys from the 8K range. If I do not go with Scheffler this week, then what I would probably plan on doing is just picking like one of the other guys up top and then trying to get as many guys from this 8K range and the 7K range as I possibly can without having to dip down into the 6K range and the 5K range, because I do think that there is a pretty precipitous drop this week after you get out of the 7K range on DraftKings. Now, one other thing is if you're betting this week, I think this is a week where I'm probably not going to be placing a whole lot of outright bets. When you think about an outright bet in a field like this, the question has to be, how can player X beat Scotty Scheffler? And the fact of the matter is, it's going to be a pretty tough task for all of them. So Scotty Scheffler is pretty likely to gain about 10 strokes tee to green if we're doing the math. And even if he just is neutral with the putter, that's 10 strokes to the field. So what you would need is you would need a guy to significantly up their tee to green games. That way they gain, 10-ish strokes to the field and then gain strokes putting. Or you would need a guy whose tee to green game can kind of just pace with Scotty, maybe gain 6 tee to green and gain 7 or 8 strokes putting and just get lightning hot, right? Like those are the only two real pathways. And that's really, really a tough ask for a lot of guys. So my main bets that I was profitable with last week were a lot of top 20 parlays that involve Scheffler, that involve Schauffele, that involved somebody else further down the board. I had a Scheffler, Schauffele, Bryson, and gosh, who was the fourth one? I think it was Lowry top 20 parlay that like instantly covered like all of my DFS losses for the week. And so that's probably going to be the way I'm going to attack it this week, except I'm going to be probably targeting guys further down the board in a top 20 parlay as opposed to just going with, some guys near the top, because I think that a lot of the guys near the top have a floor that is quite low and a ceiling that is not quite as high as Scotty Scheffler's. That is why I think I'm going to be playing a ton of Scotty Scheffler, and it's why I don't think I'm going to be trying to pick an outright winner from the guys near the top of the board this week. All right, now, with that being said, if you are not going to go with Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, there's a pretty good case to be made for him. He's kind of gotten out of the little rut that he was in. This has been a pretty good course for him throughout the years as well. He was runner-up here in 2020. He has not missed the cut here at this course. The PGA Championship, it kind of just got away from him on Sunday. He had a, great run through the week, but just, kind of couldn't really keep pace with Xander Schauffele and all those birdies on Sunday. But you look at what he's done recently in terms of his approach play. He's got his irons back. He has the ability to be a positive off the tee player, even though he's not the longest hitter. I think this is a pretty good setup for Morikawa. It would not shock me to see Morikawa win, but I'd rather just pay up for Scotty. Same deal with Jordan Spieth. He's the king of this course. He started showing signs of life at the PGA, but I'd rather just pay up for Scotty. Max Homa, similar deal. I don't think Max has shown a ceiling that is capable of beating Scotty Scheffler. I just think that he's been decent at this event. I know he's played it each of the last 2 years, but I don't know. I just don't really see the guy beating Scotty unless he just goes nuclear on the greens, and he doesn't generally go nuclear on bent grass greens. He's generally more of a POA putter. Each of the last 2 years, though, he has played here. He's finished 23rd and 9th. Last year, he gained almost 5 strokes putting. So I would say that 9th is almost his ceiling at this event if he's going to gain 5 strokes putting and still come in 9th place. Now, Tony Finau might be my favorite of the lot of the rest of the guys near the top of the board, simply because he generally plays great in the state of Texas. He ranked second in what we had in terms of the state of Texas. At this event, 4 out of the last 5 years, he's finished in the top 23 with a second and a fourth. An ugly miscut last year, but it was all on the greens. Now, one thing that's really interesting about Tony is, you may or may not believe this, but he actually led the field last week in strokes gained on approach at the PGA Championship. That is not an easy task. More strokes gained on approach than Xander, Bryson, all those guys. A little over 9 strokes total, 2.38 per round. So that's just insanely impressive for Tony. And to me, he has the type of profile where if he could keep pace tee to green with Scotty, all he has to do is have one good putting week and he has the chance to win. The first round of the PGA Championship, he gained multiple strokes putting and he was second on the leaderboard after round 1. If he was just able to sustain that for 2, 3, 4 rounds, which he didn't, then he absolutely has the tee to green game that he can win a tournament like this and beat Scotty Scheffler in that kind of format. Now, the rest of the 9K range, I'm not a super fan of. We already talked about my reservations on Siwoo Kim. I do like Brian Harman at short golf courses where accuracy is more dependent on distance. Just generally speaking, those are the courses you want to play Brian Harman at. I think Tom Hoagie is going to be chalk because his approach numbers are incredible. I think no one is going to play Sungjae Im. If you want to be different this week, that the method of being different will be to play Sungjae Im. I don't think anybody's going to play him. I think he is going to be the leverage play. There's some serious red flags in his game, though. I don't know if I'm going to be taking him up on that leverage because you look at what he's been doing. He has not been a good iron player in 2023. He has been a good off the tee guy in 2023, but this is a course that's going to mitigate your ability to gain strokes off the tee. So I just don't think that this is a good spot for him at all. And so I'm probably going to be fading Sungjae Im, but like I said, I think a lot of the rest of the field is going to be fading Sungjae Im. All right, so that does it for the top of the board. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if we can find some values. Now, I said this from the top, I love a ton of the 8K and 7K range here on DraftKings. Like, there's just a host of guys who generally up their game at shorter positional golf courses and are generally, I think of as good iron approach players. And there are also a lot of guys who might be slightly deficient off the tee, but that is not going to be something that affects them this week. And like I said, there's just a ton of them, and I'm going to be playing a lot of them, right? Like I like Zayden Hoot for fitting that description. Billy Horschel is playing some great golf, and he can get lightning hot with the putter on bent grass. And speaking of lightning hot with the putter, Danny McCarthy is probably the best putter in the field, and he also excels on short golf courses. Justin Rose and Chris Kirk have won here. Sepp Straka missed the cut at the PGA. I played a lot of Straka at the PGA. That was one that I kind of missed on, but he still gained 4 strokes on approach at that tournament. He just gave it all back on the greens, and we know he has the ability to get lightning hot with the putter on bent grass like he did last year when he won the John Deere Classic. So I think that a lot of those guys in the 8K range are shaping up really well. Keegan Bradley is another guy like Brian Harmon that we generally play on short par 70s, like TBC River Highlands, like YLI. So I think this is a pretty good spot for him. Tom Kim is also having a home game this week. He is now a Dallas resident. He is now one of the boys with Spieth and Scotty and Will Zalatoris and Tony Romo that plays in that like Dallas game they have going. So I think this is going to be a pretty good spot for him. We also know Tom Kim loves him some shorter positional golf courses. We also know he can get nuclear hot with the putter. And so he's probably going to be a guy that I play a lot of, and I hope that a lot of the field doesn't. Thomas Dietrich and Akshay Bhatia kind of buck that description, but they're both good wind players. Dietrich is a great putter on bent grass, great driver at the golf ball. Bhatia is a great approach player. I like both those guys. I'm going to be playing both of them. Taylor Moore won at one of my comp courses at the Valspar Championship, so I have no problem going with Taylor Moore, who only has 2 top 20 finishes in majors so far this year. It's pretty impressive. Aaron Rye is also a guy that popped up with a lot of stuff on the custom model, so really good Texas player, really good wind player, really good short course player. So he checks a lot of boxes. He's going to be another guy that I get to in a lot of my lineups. The question is going to be, when it comes to me finally sitting down to make my lineups, who makes more of them and who makes less of them? But I'm going to be, peppering a lot of these guys in. I think there's arguments to be made for a lot of them. And the more research I do throughout the week is going to be when I make those cuts and make those bumps and make those downgrades. Now, after that, you've got former winner here, Daniel Berger. You've got verifiably good approach player, Mark Hubbard. You've got verifiably good putter, Maverick McNeely. Just some guys that check different boxes. Austin Eckroat is probably going to be one of my favorite plays here. I was really high on him heading into the PGA Championship. He did not let me down with a T18 finish. He's also shown that he can get it done at shorter golf courses, like 17th at the RBC Heritage, win at the Honda Classic. So I really do like Austin Eckroat. He played his college golf at Oklahoma State, which is not too far down the road from Fort Worth. So I do think he's used to playing in this type of climate. He's used to playing on bent grass. When he did show up at the Byron Nelson last year, he had a top 5 finish on bent grass, also in the DFW area. So I really do like Austin Eckroat this week. He's a guy I'm going to be getting to a lot. Now, from here, let's go a little bit different. I like Doug Gim a lot this week. I think he's a guy that is a good approach player. Coming off of a 35th place finish in a major is nothing to sneeze at. And he just continually does it in a way where it's just approach. And that's what we want this week, right? Like recent approach play is one of the most important stats that we want this week, and he has it. Now, his history at Colonial is a bit of a mixed bag. He finished 14th here in 2021, but has missed the cut in his other 3 appearances. But he is a former Texas Longhorn, so he should be used to playing in this climate, and his recent approach play is the best form of his career. So I really do like Doug Gim as a value play at $7,100. Emiliano Grillo is the defending champion of this event and is only $7,100 because his recent form is absolute garbage. But who's to say he can't just catch lightning in a bottle and kind of recapture the magic that he had last year at a type of golf course that he's had a lot of success at. After that, dipping into the 6K range, like I said, I think there's a pretty precipitous drop at once you get a 6 in as the front number on DraftKings. Chris Cotterup is a ball striker supreme who missed the cut at the PGA Championship but did win at the Myrtle Beach Classic. If you're a guy who likes to bet on talent, he's not a bad one. Nate Lashley has a history of playing shorter golf courses pretty well, even though the recent form does leave a little bit to be desired. The good news is with Lashley is like when he makes the cut, he plays really well. He just doesn't always make the cut. I think he's a great guy as a boom or bust target. I think he's a great guy as a top 20 bet or a top 30 bet, maybe even a top 40 bet here this week, if you're looking to make him in any kind of top 20 to 40 parlay. After that, I think the 6K range is pretty bleak. We mentioned Harry Hall earlier as being a great bent grass putter. If you're looking at Justin Lauer, another verifiably good bent grass putter, by the way. If you're looking at just target approach play, Chan Kim, Andrew Novak, and Matty Schmid would be your guys here in the 6K range. I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of them. Dylan Wu is another one who's generally a pretty good approach player down here at $6,100. I alluded to him earlier. I think he would definitely be a guy that I would target at $6,100. Another guy that might end up being my favorite play in the low sixes, though, is Grayson Murray. Did you know that Grayson Murray has made both cuts in both majors so far this year? I didn't know that until I looked it up. He was 51st at the Masters, 43rd at the PGA. He has gained strokes on approach in every event since the Genesis Invitational. And that's going to be our number one priority this week, right? So I do think there's a little bit of value in Grayson Murray, which is not something I say very often. He has only played this event one time. He did miss the cut quite badly, but I'm willing to give him a roll of the dice given that, that approach form is nothing to sneeze at. Now down in the 5K range, it's tough. You got a Longhorn Parker Cootie, who's had some good finishes this year. Ryan Moore, short hitter, great approach player, have no problem going to him. David Skins has been pretty good at this type of golf course. 7th at the Houston Open in Houston, obviously, which is a Texas golf course. 20th at the Myrtle Beach Classic, 4th at the Cognizant Classic. Like, he generally plays like this area of the country pretty well. So I wouldn't mind, giving him a roll at 5,700. You've also got Ben Coles, who, like, the recent form is much better than what his salary on DraftKings is. I think he's a blatant misprice. He was second at the Byron Nelson a few weeks ago, which is another bent grass DFW area course. And last week was T26 at the PGA Championship. This is simply much better finishes than what his price tag is. I think he will likely be the chalk 5K play. He's objectively my favorite play in this range, though. Peter Malnati has a win at one of my comp courses, Copperhead, so maybe that's worth looking at, but his recent form is not good. Paul Haley was 5th place here last year. Ches Reavie, Matthew Neesmith, two guys who generally play short course as well, and as well as Zach Blair, I would add to that list. And then you have Ryan Palmer, who generally plays really well in the state of Texas. But other than that, that's really all you have to go off of in the 5K range. There's just not a whole lot there. Like I said, I want to structure my lineups this week around getting as much guys from the 8K and 7K range as I possibly can without sacrificing win equity at the top. All right, so that does it for looking at the board. Let's go ahead and talk about one and done strategy, and then we're going to roll on out. All right, so let's talk one and done for a little bit. So the good news is the one and done that I have been picking live here on the show. I'm in a 150 player one and done on Fantasy Golf Championships. It's open to the public, or it was open to the public, and the top 20 cash. And I've gone from placing in the 100s to now in 35th place. So I'm not that far out of cashing now. I had Rory McIlroy 2 weeks ago at Wells Fargo. That was a winner. I had Bryson last week at the PGA runner up, which just been two great picks that have got me right back into the thick of things. And I'm kind of reinvigorated. Hey, I got a chance to, climb back up and get back to the top of this leaderboard, right? And the biggest indicator of why I still have a chance is the fact that I have not used Scottie Scheffler. And looking at the ownership, right? Only 27% of my one and done has Scottie Scheffler remaining. That means that when I do get to use Scottie Scheffler, it is going to be at a high leverage opportunity. So the bad news is, yes, I missed out on Scottie's earlier wins. But the good news is, if you think he ends up winning again this season, then I'm going to have an opportunity to play him at another one of those wins. And I'm going to be doing it when a lot of other people are not going to have it, which will allow me to gain money on them. Now, I do think that this is not the place to play Scottie Scheffler, though. This is a non-signature event. The purse is not as big as the signature events or the majors, and I want to use Scottie in one of those situations. So I'm going to hold off on Scottie. Side note, I do think that the U.S. Open is the perfect spot for Scottie. Pinehurst number 2 is a course that either requires you to be super duper precise or super duper calculated and smart about where you leave your next shot, or there's like places around the greens on Pinehurst where it's just going to be impossible to get up and down. And Scotty is going to not only be able to get up and down from those spots, but he's not going to leave himself in those spots. And so I think that Scotty might win the U.S. Open by 5 shots if he's able to maintain the form that he has right now into that tournament. Anyway, that's beside the point. This week, not the week to play Scotty, but very much relishing the opportunity to play a very low-owned Scotty Scheffler somewhere down the road. Max Homa is also almost out in my one and done. This would not be a bad spot to use him if you have Max Homa available. I don't think there is very many courses down the road where I would want to use Max Homa at. In fact, generally speaking, California courses and Quail Hollow are like the only courses he really has success at. So I really would not mind rolling him out here, a course that he has had decent success at. Brian Harman and Colin Morikawa are two guys that I both like. They both generally play short courses pretty well. The only argument would be, would you want to save either of them for somewhere down the road? Brian Harman has the Travelers, or maybe you think he repeats at the Open. Colin Morikawa has Memorial next week. I also think you can make the argument for Morikawa at the Travelers as well. So those two, it's a legitimate decision. I also think Keegan Bradley is a pretty solid choice. Another guy who plays short par 70s very well. Seb Straka, very legitimate choice also. Chris Kirk, very legitimate choice. Tom Kim, very legitimate choice. Denny McCarthy, Tony Finau. Like, there's just a lot of guys that are in play this week because of, the way that the course shapes up and what I consider of their game. I like Tom Kim a lot this week, but I think I'm going to save him for later. Tony Finau is probably the one that I'm going to have to make the longest, hardest decision about, because we've already passed Mexico. We've already passed Torrey Pines. So maybe am I saving him for 3M or Rocket Mortgage, or should I just go ahead and use him here when he's coming off of one of the best approach weeks of his career? His putting stroke has turned around a little bit. You know what? I think I'm going to roll the dice on Tony Finau. If I was not rolling the dice on Tony Finau, I think that Chris Kirk or Tom Kim would be my pick. But I'm going to pick Tony Finau here for this event. And like I said, I think that if you have Max Homa, I think that this is a great spot for him. I think that if you are front running, I think that Colin Morikawa would probably be a guy that you would want to pick, or Jordan Spieth would be a guy that you would want to pick. I think those are going to be very popular selections. But from where I'm at, trying to leverage what I've got left, I think that Tony Finau is going to be my pick this week here in my one and done. Now, in the private one and done that we started at the start of the season with just kind of friends and family, I'm 13th place out of 14. I have not recovered in this one. I had John Rahm at the PGA Championship, which was just not a good decision. So that one I've got a lot of ground to make up. But the good news is the one I've been picking here on the show has been doing pretty good lately. So let's see if we can get another one going with Tony Finau. All right, so that does it for the Charles Schwab Challenge 2024. Like I said, I very much enjoy this tournament, and I'm hoping I was able to give you guys a lot of information that is going to allow you to pick some winners this week, whether you're playing DFS, betting, or one and done. If you like what you saw here on this video on YouTube, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton, and I really do appreciate it. And if you're listening on audio, please rate and review. That helps me out a ton as well. Thanks to you guys liking the video and reviewing the podcast. That helps me show up on searches and helps grow the community. And just get everything going after that. So I really do appreciate it. And also make sure you're subscribed. That way you can be with us for the rest of the PGA Tour season. All right, so that does it for this episode, y'all. We're going to go ahead and end it there. Very much looking forward to this week. Best of luck to you guys this week. Hopefully I was able to help you guys pick some winners. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you next time.